RadioNL.com. Local news now. Jeff, Bill, Jeff, Jeffy, Billy Willie. Whatever. It's NL Mornings with Jeff and Bill.
All right, good morning here, 7:42 the time right now, Wednesday, May 22nd, and every Wednesday, once we get through our news, weather, sports package, we like to do a little segment called Coffee with the Councillor, where we welcome somebody from around the Kamloops City Council table to join us here and talk a little bit about some of the city business. Now, usually do this on Wednesdays because there's council on Tuesdays, but it's a long weekend that we're coming off of, so there was no council this week, but I'm sure there's still lots to get into. This week's guest, Councillor Mike O'Reilly. Mike, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm well. Yourself?
I'm not too bad. Appreciate you coming in. How was the long weekend? Did you get up to much? It was a kind of a typical May long weekend where you just never really got great weather and didn't really know what to expect.
Exactly what to expect. It was a mixed bag, but no, it was a nice weekend to relax, and we ended up at the kangaroo farm in Kelowna.
Oh yeah. I haven't been there in a while. Is it still as cool as ever?
I was busy.
Yeah.
May long weekend in Kelowna was busy, but we just went for the day, so we're back.
Right on. All right, let's talk a little bit about some city stuff that's going on. And maybe we'll start with Build Kamloops, because I know this is something that we obviously are continuing to work towards. You guys have been doing quite a bit of work behind the scenes. Every time I bring this up, I'm sort of wondering, hey, are we going to see something imminent soon? Are we going to have some announcements? Are we going to be talking more about at least some sort of tangible projects that we could be looking at? Just sort of what is the latest right now in terms of how you guys are meeting and getting together and making some progress? Because you have started to kind of increase the frequency of meetings a little bit here as well.
Yeah, certainly the working groups are doing a lot of the heavy lifting,
Yeah.
the four different working groups. But ultimately, we're hoping to have something to be able to talk about more in the next 3 to 4 weeks would come out for conversation piece. And the biggest reason that we can't come public with things right now is a lot of it revolves around location. And of course, that's the number one things people want to know. Okay, what's the facility and where's it going to be?
Right.
Well, as you can imagine, when it comes to real estate deals, once speculation happens as to where a facility may go, then land prices increase. So those types of things have to be done,
Right.
but in camera, and then we will be bringing something forward out to the public. I would hope within the next month, 3 or 4 weeks. But again, that's just the nature of doing real estate transactions or deals. Is those have to be done behind.
When you're talking about locations of certain places, I guess how much is it a factor, I guess, in terms of what you're talking about? If you look at something like an arena, does it really matter where it is? It's more about just getting some ice. If you're looking at maybe like a pool space, that location is probably a little bit more important to talk about where in the city it's going to be located.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important for any of these facilities. So if you look at ice as an example, do you want it to be easily accessible by people coming into town? Do you want it to be near a business area where there can be more economic spin-off? While your kids are playing sports, they would go to stores to go shopping
Right.
and spend money rather than way out, 30 minutes out of town. You don't really get the economic spin-off of people coming into Kamloops to do sports. And those are things that we're definitely weighing heavily. Also, is it land that we already own? Is it land that we need to purchase? Is there a land swap that would happen? They're very important things. What other amenities are around? Can we incorporate housing into any of these developments? And these are all things that are being looked at. But obviously, any of the land surrounding the properties we may be looking at would increase potentially in value via speculation. And so again, until deals are done, it's hard to talk about.
Yeah, and I guess just in terms of what we're talking about, I know you probably can't get into too much detail, but like how many different announcements, I guess, are possible here? Is it looking at sort of one project? Because I know like last time I talked to you, I think it was Stephen Karpuk who I had on here, who was mentioning, if we're going to be building one facility, we should probably have like 3 or 4 things within that facility. So like, are we talking about one announcement, 4 announcements, any sort of inkling as to how much progress we're going to be making on kind of the initial steps?
Yeah, I think overall, when things do come out, it would be a high level picture as to, okay, this is what we want to see for Build Kamloops, and these are the potential locations. These are things that maybe we can do right away. Is there another batch that maybe we go to a potential referendum or an AAP for? And then the third phase could potentially be further down the road once the first phase is done or second phase is done. This isn't just a one-off. We'll build one or two things.
Yeah, no,
this
for sure.
is looking at what Kamloops needs over a long horizon, well past my time in politics, past anybody sitting around the horseshoe. That's how long Build Kamloops is going to live for, and I think that's what we need. We need that long-term vision. And so that people kind of get an idea, this is what we're doing for our facilities to keep up with the population increase and also the expectations of our citizens of what they want and what they need.
One of the other things I did want to talk to you about today was the housing targets, and we know that the province has sort of put an initiative on the table for Kamloops to build over 4,000 over the next number of years here. But just in connection to Build Kamloops, how much are these kinds of two different issues somewhat connected? Because as we talk about building more houses, that's going to mean our population expands, which makes Build Kamloops even more important.
Yeah, it absolutely does. At the same breath, we are well behind on our recreational facilities. We haven't had things built here in 30 years since a new pool, 30 years since a net new sheet of ice. And that's a long time, and a lot of our population has grown by that point. But also, when we look at our facilities through Build Kamloops, and you talked about our housing targets, we also have a land trust that council created, and that's been in the works for over 5 years. That potentially that could look at how can we build on top of these facilities and put in multifamily units or residential in the recreational facilities above or around.
So how much is that a part of the conversation? Then I guess, like, obviously you haven't committed yourself to anything here, but just sort of everything's on the table, right?
Yeah, well, and that's what the concept working group is doing, right? So they're saying, okay, we've got a box. What can we do with this box? What can we do under the box? What can we do above the box? And again, that's one of the working groups. And as I'd mentioned, that's where the heavy lifting is done. But when we look at the housing targets that Kamloops has been forced upon us, I'm not in support of that. I'm not in favor of being on the list.
Right.
I don't think we should be. We're the only city outside of the Lower Mainland that is on that list. It was done. It was a desktop exercise, as far as I'm concerned, out of Victoria, and we should not be on that list. Nonetheless, we are punching above our weight for what needs to be done, and things get missed, in the media, right? Well, what's council doing? We've approved thousands of units already this council. As a prime example, we just had a public hearing last Tuesday, and that was for the Tournament Inn site, which a lot of people complain about how the Tournament Inn site in Valley View looks, but we rezoned that for a new hotel and multifamily residential. Again, these are things that we've been setting the stage for this via revitalization tax exemption, increased density on sites, well ahead of times. But again, it takes time for developers to catch up with the initiatives that we put in place.
Here with Kamloops Councillor Mike O'Reilly in studio. So you mentioned the targets, 4,236 new homes built by September of 28. This is what the province has stated that wants the tournament capital here to go ahead and do. And you mentioned, don't want to be really forced to have a certain number. What happens if we don't hit those targets? Do you have any ideas? Is there really any repercussions? It's like it's great to have targets, but if you don't make them, then who cares?
No one knows.
That's the
no
thing,
one
right?
knows.
So,
and it was an announcement. We were put on the list, and it is what it is. But as much as people are saying, "Oh, how do we get these built? How do we get these built?" Council doesn't build any units. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
We try and create the environment and remove barriers to market entry for people to do. But frankly, I can tell you this is more of an interest rate story than anything. Developers are holding off. Developers can't make a buck when they're doing multifamily with interest rates the way they are. And I can suggest once the interest rates start dropping, hopefully in the coming months, I say months plural, but hopefully in the next month or two, I believe at the June meeting, maybe it'll start potentially after that. But that's when we'll see developers starting to go. But this is an interest rate story, and it makes it very difficult. The amount of risk that gets put on a developer because the margins become so slow or so low that they don't want to take it. They'll just wait till interest rates drop and then they'll proceed.
Yeah, I mean, with that in mind, I guess, what do you do with that as a council? I mean, it's not really up to you to tell a developer what to do and when the best thing for them to be a business is. Is it up to the province to come forward and say, look, like, this is something we got to do? I'm trying to grasp, okay, we just throw out a great number here, build these 4,000+ units. Well, I just don't understand how we go about doing that without having any sort of, I guess, background incentive or initiative or something to really push the envelope here.
Well, and I guess that's where the frustration from my side comes. And, when we look how Kamloops is laid out and built, is we're along 3 major highways, we're along 2 major rail lines, 2 riverbeds, surrounded by the silt bluff zone throughout Valley View. So, yeah, we've got a lot of empty land in Kamloops where if you're looking on a desktop, hey, that makes sense. There's lots of land. But usable land that's not in a floodplain, that's not in a statutory right-of-way, is very little. And on top of that, 35% of the land around Kamloops in our municipal borders is in the agricultural land reserve. The agricultural land reserve map has not been looked at in just over 50 years.
Whoa.
And I'm not suggesting, I think agricultural land is extremely valuable.
Of course.
However, again, going back to a desktop exercise in Victoria 50 years ago, lines were arbitrarily drawn. There's a lot of land in Kamloops that's in the ALR that should not be in the ALR. It will never be agriculturally used, and that needs to be looked at.
So is that something you're looking to maybe put on the table here pretty soon, or is that going to be something that could even be a part of Build Kamloops in some way, shape, or form? I know that's like I know that's recreational facilities, but I mean, you're talking about where can we build stuff. I mean, I would think like, again, maybe not directly a part of it, but there is some sort of backroom connection, I guess, there.
Yeah, so we've sent a letter off to the Agricultural Land Reserve asking them to come to present to council and understand why haven't they updated
like
the
half
maps.
a century is an insane amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, there's been minor little tweaks done in 50 years, but not looking at it overall. But I had a chance to talk with the ALR when they presented at TNRD about a month ago, and I said, well, how does the ALR overlap with the housing needs? I haven't never really heard of an agricultural land crisis in my tenure on council as much as I've heard of a housing crisis.
Right.
And they said, we don't operate anything to do with BC builds or a housing crisis. That's nothing to do with us. But in the same breath, I think with how much land is in Kamloops, at 35% of our land is in the ALR, it needs to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, it certainly all makes sense to me. I definitely have maybe some follow-up to get through here at some point, waiting for that month announcement, and we'll kind of go from there, I guess.
That sounds great.
All right, Mike, always appreciate the time. Thanks so much for coming in. We'll do it again soon.
Always a pleasure. Never a chore.
Awesome stuff. Kamloops Councillor Mike O'Reilly joining us here in studio on this May 22nd for this week's edition of Coffee with a Councillor. It's approaching 7:55. You're listening to NL Mornings with Jeff and Bill. We'll be back right after this. Please stick around.
Speak now or forever hold your peace. Or some.